What's up, guys? John Sawicki here from Vigilante Copywriter. I haven't done one of these videos in a while, but I saw an email come through from Alex Hormozi that I thought was pretty good and had some interesting stuff in it. So I kind of wanted to make a video to break some of it down, discuss a few things, hopefully help out some people who are both copywriters and also, business owners. If you're not familiar with me, I'm a email marketer, copywriter, marketing consultant, all that stuff. I primarily specialize in working with music and guitar related brands. Also do a ton of stuff in the fitness space, especially bodybuilding, functional training, actual, strength athlete type stuff. And I've also done a bunch of stuff in BizOp. I have my own list. I, do coaching programs. I help people with their copy and their writing, their mindset and client acquisition, all that stuff. So I have some perspective on this, both as a copywriter and frankly, as a coach and a consultant. And what's interesting about this email in particular is it's really speaking to copywriting. It's an email about copywriting in a way. And so we're going to discuss not only the content of the email, what's actually written, but actually some of the ideas and how they might relate to you as a copywriter, as you work on your craft of copy. So let's get into this. What I did was I copy and pasted the actual text of the email, including the subject line, into this Google Doc so that we can kind of reference my comments a little bit more easily. And then I have a couple other windows open that we'll be looking at as well. Okay, so first of all, this is from Alex Hormozi. Now, I just want to say, Alex Hormozi is a smart guy. This is not going to be a video where I, intentionally try to bash him or bash this email or make up shit to criticize just to be provocative or to stir anything up. That's just not how I am. And it's not how I, contribute to the marketing community. There are some things in here that I might sort of say, maybe I think he could do it differently, but I just want to say, I don't think Alex is, doing his email list, in a half-assed way. I don't think he's not paying attention to things that may not work or something like that. So let's just get into a few things. And again, the idea here is to not just criticize everything, but to actually look at, hey, what can we extract from this and apply to our own writing, our own copy, our own businesses, etc. All right. So first up, the subject line. So Alex does this thing where he'll start the subject line with Mozi Money Minute. I don't think he does this with every email, but these emails that qualify as these Mozi Money Minutes, he'll start the subject line with these words. Now, I personally wouldn't do this. And the reason is that I have this concept that I call early real estate. So when you have copy, especially in a digital format, usually the most important, space is what I call the early real estate, which is usually top and to the left, if you're reading it. And so in a subject line, if you're reading it on your phone, the latter portion of it might get cut off, right? So that first part might be the only thing the person sees. And at the very least, it's going to be the first thing the person sees. And on the one hand, saying, hey, it's a Mozi Money Minute, that implies some amount of value, right? Because it's only a minute long. And maybe people on the list are conditioned to be like, oh, these Mozi Money Minutes are awesome. I'm excited to see that. But I would still say, I personally, at least, and maybe he's tested this, I would at least not do that every time. I would test putting it elsewhere just to see if you get a little bit of an open rate boost. You can put it in the preview text. We'll talk about that in a second. Or maybe put it at the end of the email subject line. So you have the subject line and maybe a bracket and then Mozi Money Minute. Then subject line, 50% conversion rate boost. I mean, it's a positive, benefit. That's pretty standard copy stuff. So I don't think it's a bad subject line. It's a pretty, compelling promise. So, and we will talk about a few ideas I have for maybe making it better, but it's a fine subject line. Now he starts the email with kind of this side note. It says words I like, and I guess it's sort of like a quote or something like that. It's just a little bit of, wisdom or advice, but it is not related to this 50% conversion rate thing. So first of all, I would explain that. I would say side note, or before I get to the main point of this email, just here's a thing I like. Something that guides the reader a little bit more through what, where this is in relation to the ideas being presented here. I'd also say it might be better for a PS. I'll talk a little bit more about the PS in a second. But for me, I always try to think about, I always kind of treat the reader like I need to hold their hand through the process. You know what I mean? And this is really common, especially and important in direct response style copy, specifically, maybe really all marketing. But you don't want to assume the reader understands where your process is at, because they're walking into this completely blind, right? Now, again, maybe more of Alex's emails start like this, so maybe people are used to it. I would still like err on the side of like treat each email as if someone either isn't opening your emails or hasn't read anything in a while or whatever. So just a small thing. Again, it's not super related to the rest of what's to come, and there's nothing really explained about why it's not related. So that's just something I would have done. And again, I think it might fit better in the PS, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So then he gets to the like sort of the bulk of the email, and I do like how he starts with kind of a heading here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But the email is kind of broken up into these like little heading sections, and I think that's awesome. Not a lot of copywriters do this, but because I think we're so used to seeing super long form style, like these fucking 50-page sales letters and all this stuff. But the more you can break it up visually, I think the better, because you can. First of all, it makes it seem like each little chunk, each little section of the email is kind of digestible. It's kind of like that thing from I think The Simpsons where the dude's like, "Ooh, piece of candy, ooh, piece of candy, ooh, piece of candy." Super easy to read each little section at a time, and it just visually breaks it up. It makes it less intimidating. It makes it easier to read, and it's just easier to like kind of organize as you look at it, right? And again, we'll talk more about that in a second. But I do like having little sub headlines and little or like headers or whatever, even in email, not even if it's like a super long form sales letter or like a Google Doc or something. All right. So I like that he does that. And by the way, I don't know who wrote this. Maybe Alex wrote it himself. Maybe he's got a copywriter. I do have a buddy who's done some stuff for Alex, so maybe it's him. You know who you are if you're seeing this. So let's look at the actual text here. So there are very few things that always work. So I like this as a kind of an opening line, actually, because it acknowledges the doubt or the objection that someone might have about some of the stuff that he's about to say. So it's sort of like, listen, I know this may sound crazy. It's that kind of thing. So there are very few things that always work, but this tactic is as close as it gets. So that's, again, solid way to qualify what you're about to say. I once ran all my emails and web pages through this process and got a permanent 50% boost. So I like this because it kind of is like real life proof. It's like him qualifying and giving proof to what he's saying from a thing he's actually done. You know what I mean? And, there's not a lot of evidence, but like, if you're reading this, you trust what Alex is saying. And I'm not saying that to be like Alex should have put more evidence. I just mean, let's understand that the reason that he can be so simplistic in presenting this story is because we are, as the readers, highly familiar with him. If you think about like awareness levels or like market sophistication, all that sort of academic way of analyzing this, we're a little bit higher in terms of our relationship with Alex, right? Whereas if this was like a list from some guy who's, Instagram ad you clicked on, he's not super well known, doesn't have a super, connected relationship with his audience, you might have to explain a bit more to get someone to buy into believing something like this, right? Anyway, that's just something to think about in terms of like marketing theory and copy theory as it would relate to something that you might be writing. You can't just like copy and paste what someone else is doing. You have to understand the why behind it. Okay. So this is sort of like real life proof, and then, pretty bold, but also attractive claim to say it gave a permanent 50% boost, right? So that really makes you go, shit, I want to keep reading. Okay. However, I just want to say, I think you can incorporate in theory some of this stuff here into the subject line, and maybe it would make the subject line a bit more interesting. Again, 50% conversion rate boost, positive, beneficial thing, pretty good subject line. But some of this like gives a little bit more detail that I think might make it a little bit more interesting. So something like, this is just something I like pulled out of the air. Like, this gave me a permanent, the subject line would be like, this gave me a permanent 50% boost on all channels. This is a bit long, so I'd probably try to shorten this, but like permanent 50, you could even just say permanent 50% on 50% conversion boost, and then I put in parentheses third grader trick. Now I sort of intentionally made this subject line a bit longer just to like show some different ideas here. Obviously you could try to shorten it. But I like this idea of it was permanent. I kind of like the idea of like, it was kind of a simple like idea. It's not necessarily a simple thing to do because this can be quite time consuming, what we're about to discuss. But in theory, right? The idea of it is quite simple. And then I put like third grader trick because, that creates a little bit more curiosity. And then I would say again, you can put the Mosey Money Minute in the preview, so it's still right there in the inbox, both on your phone and on the desktop. But it doesn't necessarily chew up the subject line. Now, I will say this just real quick about the subject line thing. I don't think that necessarily like having the Mosey Money Minute thing there is like tanking his open rates. I think at the end of the day, if people want to, this is probably true for marketing in general. If you have good shit, people are going to open. And these little things about like, shaving off a little bit of text here and there is not necessarily going to make or break whether something works or not. However, and this is kind of ironic, I guess, like, is it ironic? Is it coincidental? Whatever. It's related to what's in here is that, he's talking about simplifying things and it gave him a 50% boost. Guess it depends on how much you simplify it. But some of what I'm suggesting, and it's funny, in a way, I'm making the subject line more complicated by adding a little bit more substance to it. But I'm also suggesting to shave off some other stuff that might be kind of like bloat, right? Anyway, let's keep going. I think that you could add some of this stuff to the subject line and make it a bit more sexy. I myself, like when I saw this subject line, I was like, do I need everyone would like a 50% conversion boost, but I was kind of like, does this even apply to me? Like there was an element of like, it didn't actually attract me that much. It's actually kind of funny that I even opened this email in the first place. So let's keep going. Okay, so sorry. So now we're here. So here's how it works. So I like again that it's underlined, so it's a little easier to like read and understand what's going on. Run every script you write, every webinar, every email through a reading level calculator. It'll tell you your grade, then keep correcting it until it's below third grade. I use Hemingway app, Google it. It's free and I have no affiliation. Okay. I'm a little surprised he doesn't bold more of the text here. This is similar to how I feel about these like little subheadings and stuff. I love bolding text in emails. Again, it just makes like the information that the reader needs to see pop out a bit more. Okay. And I see a few different places in this email you could certainly do that. So reading level calculator, third grade. You could even bold like actually right inside Hemingway. This doesn't mean you attract dumb people. You could bold, and then the CTA at the bottom, like we just released seats for a new workshop at our HQ, like that, because you want basically someone who's skimming this to be able to still get the information that they need, even if they're reading it like as fast as possible. And this is a pretty short email. It's pretty, the language has been pretty simplified in most cases, but I still think that you would benefit from bolding some stuff. I bold things in pretty much every email I write for myself and for my clients. I don't really see a downside, except for one thing that maybe we'll talk about in a second. Well, actually, I don't know if I have it noted here. Basically, I do wonder if the reason he's not bolding anything is because he, and some copywriters will say that they like this, is because he doesn't want it to be easy for you to skim. He actually wants you to read, to kind of force you to read, to engage with the text, to hang out in the email longer, and to read all the way to the end. That's certainly a valid theory. I'm not going to say that that's always wrong. I think on average, it's still better to bold stuff. It's a similar reason that I think a lot of people don't use things like these subheadlines or whatever, is because they kind of want to force you to read. I still think that like, a lot of people are just not going to read, right? People are just kind of lazy. They have, bad attention span, whatever. So I would still err on the side of having it be as easy as possible for someone to, obtain the information that's in the email. Let's keep going. So then he says, below third grade usually means : these things. All right. So first of all, I love colons, dude. In copy, I use colons all the fucking time. You probably even saw it in the email. If you're on my email list, you probably saw it in the email that went out about this video. I just love that it visually can break up the text so that, again, it looks like my text is in little sections or chunks, and it replaces words. So in this case, it's not really replacing any words. It's just visually breaking up text, again, which I think is super effective. But in other cases, it can replace words like is, or I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. In the moment, I'm struggling to think of something, but it can often replace words, and it adds that visual breakup. So I think using colons and dashes are fucking awesome. So he didn't need to do that here grammatically, right? here you have to do it kind of grammatically. Here you didn't need to do it grammatically. Below third grade usually means simpler words, this, that, the other thing. He just listed it all out. But by using the colon, again, it kind of breaks it up, turns it into a bit of a list. I think that works really well. In this part, he makes it seem almost kind of complicated. You need to use simpler words, shorter sentences, fewer adverbs. I would bet a lot of people, don't remember, even in the copywriting world, probably don't remember some of these terms from school. Adverbs, passive language, etc. Maybe I'm a bit cynical there. I just have, coached a lot of people and interacted with a lot of people who don't remember a lot of these sort of academic writing terminology, right? So he's making it seem a bit complicated, which in general in copy, I would argue like what you're kind of doing is you're presenting a simple solution to the problem, but the actual how you do it can seem complicated, and therefore you seek out a resource to help you get it done, right? And now he's not selling a like writing course here, so I don't necessarily think he's doing that, but in general, again, just to make this a little bit more broadly applicable to people watching this video, I think that using doing something to make it seem like there's a lot to do or a lot you could do can sometimes make the prospect feel positively overwhelmed in the sense that it's positive for the business because it makes them then seek out help or buy your course or whatever. And we shouldn't lie about that. We shouldn't be dishonest or deceptive, but it does make sense to it can make sense to present the complicated nature of things so that people understand how complicated it is and therefore seek out help, as opposed to making it seem so simple they can do it themselves, when in reality, they would be better served by getting help. So do that in your copy when it's appropriate. All right, let's keep going. If you want to take this to the next level, actually write inside Hemingway. This gives you real-time feedback and makes you a better writer that much faster. It was one of the things that transformed my writing. Again, I think that this kind of creates proof. Again, we already are so familiar with Alex. The readers respect Alex. So the more he can say about how this positively benefited him or his business or made him money or whatever, we're going to buy into it more. I would say, though, I would be careful about this. This is more of a, this is separate from me looking at this email. I'd be careful with this advice. I don't think Hemingway, and I could be wrong about this, it doesn't always save, like, maybe if you buy like a premium version or some shit, but it won't always save what you're writing. And if the internet kicks off or if something happens with your computer, you can actually lose what you've written. And so I kind of have this strict rule for myself. I always write in Google Docs, because if the internet, if I lose connection or something, or if something happens and my computer freezes, and, it is rare, but even if it happens once in a million, times of you writing, that one time could be you were writing something that was brilliant and then you lose it forever. So I would actually be careful about that. I would probably write in your Google Doc someplace that's auto-saving constantly, and then just, check it consistently in Hemingway. Now, I will say what's kind of funny about this as a piece of advice is that this is really something that, like, this is one of the first things I was told as a copywriter. Like, one of the very, very first things I ever did when I started, like, seriously copywriting was using Hemingway and keeping an eye on the simplicity of my language. And it does help. Like, this actually is good advice. But it's funny to me that, like, to me, this is like, absolute beginner level advice when it comes to writing copy. And it's interesting to me that maybe Alex's audience needed to hear this, or maybe, in reality, we all need a reminder. And, every now and then I still check my shit in Hemingway to make sure that it's simple enough and good. But once you do it for a while, you kind of like inherently like kind of build the muscle or the awareness of having a simpler language. But it's funny to me that, Alex is kind of talking in a lot of cases to like higher level businesses and really seeking those people out as clients of his. And even down here, we'll talk about how he, makes you kind of qualify yourself to work with him. But this is super beginner level advice. Now, maybe this is one of those things where like you're an awesome business owner or entrepreneur, but you're high level at that, but maybe like not that skilled as a copywriter and not that experienced as a copywriter, hence why they hire copywriters. But from a copywriter perspective, pretty much, at least me and all my friends, the way we were trained, like, this is stuff we already know. And maybe that's us, maybe that's not everybody, who knows. And for sure, there is a lot of copy out there with very complicated language. So I agree with this as a piece of advice. We'll talk about it more in a second. I wouldn't take it too far, but it's just funny to me that this is the point of this email, where to me it would be so beginner level that I would almost never talk about it unless I was selling a literal beginner level course. But Alex probably knows his audience better than I do. Maybe this is actually something they need to hear. And while the real-time feedback might be good, I would say, first of all, again, be cautious about losing what you're writing. So I would do it in Google Docs, let it autosave continuously, then check it in Hemingway or whatever as you go. But I would also say, like, the real-time feedback to me would be distracting, and I would want to focus on the actual writing and not be writing, but not really thinking about what I'm writing, but thinking about the grade level. And in copy, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit. I know I keep saying that, but like, although we do want the stuff to be simple, I think it is more important to have good ideas and like compelling ideas than to just present them simply. If you have a stupid idea, but you present it in the most simple way, it's not going to be it's not going to be as good as having a great idea that's maybe not as simplified as it could be in theory, right? So I would be kind of distracted if I was writing in Hemingway constantly and having the fucking highlighted stuff show up. We'll look at that maybe in a sec. But you know, I would just write and focus on the writing and the ideas and the quality of your writing, and then work on simplifying it. They're almost like two different muscles. Maybe an analogy there would be like, if I'm like doing a heavy bench press in the gym, I could kind of like tilt my head and look at what I'm doing in the mirror and check my form. But in doing so, I'm going to be distracted from actually doing the lift and frankly might injure myself. So I kind of look at writing the same way. Hopefully that makes sense. We're moving on. So then, to be clear, and again, he has another one of these little headlines. I love that. Simplifying language doesn't mean you attract dumb people. It means you make it easier for higher level people and you make it possible for lower level people. I would probably have italicized easier and possible just to emphasize the way you would say it verbally. By the way, I think that this is something a lot of people think. I thought this when I first got started. I remember talking to one of my early copy mentors. Shout out to Daryl if he sees this. And I asked him literally this question. And indeed, yeah, when you write copy, it's not about making it stupid or attracting stupid people or whatever. It's about taking the ideas and making them as digestible as possible. The core idea should still be there, but you want to make it as digestible and easy to consume as possible. And someone at a high level is actually grateful for that because they probably have so much crap going on, so much shit in their head that they don't want to spend a lot of cognitive energy to understand what you're talking about. And when I critique copy, actually, this is some advice I give out a lot, which is like, if the ideas are presented in a really complicated way, I'll say things like, I'll say to my coaching student or whatever, I'll say, this is like, I can feel that this is making my brain tired. I can feel that you're making me do a lot of cognitive work to get to the point that you're trying to make. Okay. So that valid, thing for you to be thinking about. Again, this email aside, you as a copywriter might be seeing this and going, hey, wouldn't that attract dumb people? Well, not necessarily. End result, more people will understand you and buy your stuff. I would have capitalized the M here. That's a small thing. And he capitalized all the other things after the colons everywhere else. So it would just to me, it would give this a little bit more impact. And again, I might have bolded this or something. This tactic came up when I spoke to a business struggling with sales. I'm reading more of the email, by the way. I could tell by the way the founder talked about his product, his language was the problem. After he changed, his business grew. Yours may too. Okay. So first of all, this is really common. I actually see this a lot with business owners, especially in more woo-woo-y-esque spaces, where the language to describe the phenomena that you're addressing and the solutions to it can be kind of esoteric or just frankly, complicated. And so the language will make perfect sense to them, or it'll make them feel good. It'll be like, oh yeah, all these complicated ideas, isn't it cool that it's so complicated? But in reality, you do need to simplify it in a lot of cases to attract your ideal customer and to just get the damn conversion. And in addition, while the actual problems might be complicated, a lot of times the presenting problems that people are facing are quite simple. I want to lose weight. I want to be more productive. I want to not be single. I want to build big muscles. I want to make a bunch of money. It's very simple stuff on some level, right? But super common. I see this a lot with businesses and friends and all that shit. I will say though, this little anecdote doesn't, it doesn't really relate as much as it could to the rest of the email. Like what happened with the business's text? Like, did they do what he said? Um, I suspect that this is like Alex just, trying to make this email even simpler. I think that he could have said something else to have like really connected these two ideas. But he's also trying to lead into the CTA. So then we have a really simple transition, which I think is fine. And the reason I emphasize the positivity of this is I do find a lot of business owners, especially, are really afraid to ask for the sale. So they either they give away so much shit in the email, and they make the email all this like free value or whatever. And then when it switches to the CTA, if they even do one, it's like there's all this like padding, basically, that is a covert way of them like apologizing for asking for a sale, right? Or they don't even do it at all. And then that removes the opportunity for someone to take action and buy your thing and solve their problem, right? So you're hurting yourself financially and you're hurting them in terms of solving their problem. So you can really just say, hey, if you want to learn more about this, go do this. Or hey, if this sounds good to you, go do this. Or in this case, if you'd like my team to help you find and remove the growth limiters on your business, we just released seats for a new workshop at our HQ on January 6th and 7th. Click here to see if you qualify. Again, super simple CTA, smooth transition, and there's also a lot of implied confidence about this. And I think that's really a powerful thing in copy and probably life in general. There's not a lot of buildup and like capital C copy to get to the damn CTA. It's just like, here's the thing. You either want it or you don't. Here you go. So again, simple, and that implies a lot of confidence, and that, in turn makes it seem more valuable. So definitely powerful stuff there. A lot of copy, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this too. Like when you're building up to the CTA, you might add a lot of text in order to like, like you're basically really trying to convince your prospect. You know what I mean? You're like, seriously, click this fucking link, bro. It's amazing. You're adding all this like salesy persuasive language. But the fact that you have to do that can have this like backwards effect where the fact that you have to do it implies you're not as confident about the thing that you're doing or whatever. And frankly, it also just like delays the time to get to the damn link. So it adds all this extra padding, also gives more language they have to digest. So in a lot of cases, I actually really think that it's more powerful to just say less and, act confident, and people will treat you accordingly. And this is probably a lesson for life in general. Keep it simple. You'll sell more. Alex, again, confident kind of sign off there. Is there anything else I want to say about this? I have some notes in front of me. Let me just glance at it real quick. Yeah. All right. Let's look at the PS, and then I think we'll wrap this up. So, where do I want to begin with this? So basically what's in this PS, and I'll actually show you, is this image. And it's a before and after in Hemingway. So basically he has this sentence that he's saying is more complicated, and then he changes it and it doesn't have any of the highlights that so I don't know if you've ever used Hemingway before, and I just copy and pasted that email in here to show you. It'll highlight stuff that are like, that's hard to read, basically. And so the implication here being, this is hard to read and understand. This is easier because it's not highlighted. First of all, I think I would have just put this actual image in the email, like maybe right here. Or you could put it a little bit earlier, but it doesn't really matter. Here, something like that is fine. And there's a couple reasons for this. First of all, it would really help cement the argument here. And so I would have just said something like, well, as you can see, the second one is easy to read or whatever. Like I would have put like, here's an example of a before and after. As you can see, the second sentence is way easier to read. That's what your copy should look like or whatever. And then that also avoids the issue of having people click off the email, because if they click away, so if I'm on my phone and I click this and now I'm in a different window, in order for me to go take action on the thing he really wants me to take action on, which is this thing, I have to go back. Now, hopefully I read this and I remembered, but again, it's kind of like, you're hoping that people do the thing you want them to do, as opposed to like really making it easier for them to do the thing you want them to do. And I'm not really sure you benefit anything from having people click away to look at this image. Now, maybe the benefit is they have a higher click rate that can help with deliverability. In this scenario, yeah, it's a higher click rate, but it's like it's kind of a what's the word, like a fluff stat, because they're clicking but not really to anything they can buy, so it doesn't really matter that much. And again, I think like it's just easier to have it like it. Also, I guess like it kind of like changes the flow of ideas, because we have this main point that you're making about using Hemingway and simplifying language, and then we move to the CTA here, and then the PS actually has us go back, right? It has to go back to this thing about simplifying your writing. I think it would be better to just have the image in the email. Now, maybe he didn't put the image in the email because in some cases people are weary about putting images in emails because it can affect your deliverability. On average, my experience is it barely affects deliverability, especially if it's just one little image. So I don't think that makes a big difference. I've done a ton of deliverability testing and promo tab and all that shit. And frankly, adding one image in all of my testing, I've done a lot of it, I don't think it's ever been the difference maker in terms of promo tab or not, or spam or not. One image. And Alex is, and we're going to go to my inbox, like Alex is putting an image here, technically, this acquisition.com thing. So he's putting images. So I don't know. I might just be being kind of pedantic about this, but I think it's worth noting. Like, I would have just put that image in the email, so no one has to click away. It just flows. It continues the idea, and then the only thing they have to click on is the thing that you want them to buy. So what else do I want to say about this? I think also the language here is a bit unclear. Most people's writing before and after, it just hits different. When I saw this, I wasn't really sure what it was referring to. Like, I was like, was this an example? What is this, a typo? Because it's not a complete sentence. So I would have at least put, here's an example of a before and after, just something to make the language a bit more clear. But again, I think putting the image in the email, you like actually would have been able to explain it a bit more, and it would have more readily made sense. However, and this is something I want to say about this whole point of this Hemingway shit. Simpler, I don't think, is always better, because it, as I said earlier, you want to take the ideas and make them as simple as possible while still conveying the core message that you're trying to say. But sometimes when you use Hemingway and when you kind of overemphasize the grade level above the idea or the point that you're making or whatever, you can actually lose the essence of what you're saying. So if we look at this, in order to be able to persuade people better, make sure your words are written below most people's reading level. Okay? I agree that that's complicated. But then to persuade more people, write better. In a sense, and I'm being a bit like overly analytical about this, but to make a good point, write better is not the same as saying write below a reading level. Like, write better is way too vague. And in a sense, if we think about this as like actual like grade levels, this is the problem when little kids write, is they just go, I like this is good, this is not good. And it's it's not, in a way, it's not like actually detailed and specific enough in terms of like conveying their full ideas. And so you don't always want to like make it simpler just for the hell of it. It should still retain the core message that you're trying to say. So as a copywriter or whatever, if you're watching this, definitely use Hemingway, but don't let it detract from the message. You know what I'm saying? In addition, I don't think you have to be super neurotic about the exact grade level. In general, I do think third grade is a good level to aim for, or lower. But sometimes I've written stuff where it's like, it's really simple, and Hemingway is telling me this is grade 5, and I'm like, okay, it's in the ballpark, right? And frankly, like, there's sometimes where I'm like, I don't really see a way to simplify this. So maybe it has to be a little bit higher. I probably on average doesn't need to be higher than grade 5, I'll be honest. But I don't think you have to be exactly so specific about like, it's not at grade 3, so it's not going to work. And it's, these are just tools, and they're not 100% accurate. And like, and also like, there's different ways to like hack Hemingway by like, for example, this thing, run every script you write, period, every webinar, every email. Like, I'm actually kind of curious if I do this, what happens? Maybe nothing, but sometimes, adding periods, I've noticed. Yeah. So you notice that like I just took away the periods and it gave me a highlight. Now it didn't change the grade level, but I would argue like this is the same thing, right? And I know in copywriting we all hate commas or whatever the hell, but I'm just saying that there's like little things you can do to like make Hemingway kind of goof a little bit. So I would look at it less as like it has to be exactly grade 3, and I would look at it more as like a range. As long as it's plus or minus grade 3, you're probably doing fine. And definitely don't overthink it, and don't let it, as I said, detract from the quality of your ideas. Anyway, so overall, I thought this was a cool email. Some of the things I like the most about it are the simple, clear, and also like really compelling claims he makes about it. He actually does reveal the process and gives you some value there. So from a value giving standpoint, it's a positive email that makes someone want to continue reading your emails. And this is a topic for another video, but I think having email content that actually is compelling and isn't just the direct response style, kind of like curiosity, inducing, like, hey, you got to click here to watch this, another fucking VSL. Because eventually just people get used to that and they get fatigued, right? They don't want to keep clicking to see the same damn VSL. And having some value in the emails is actually really helpful. And Hormozi has really made a lot of his career around giving a lot of value up front and then like having hyper qualified high ticket stuff in the background. So I think that this really fits his brand, but it's also like really useful and a good kind of email to send to a list. So no matter what niche you're in, I think sending some emails like this where the email itself has some, for lack of a better term, value. And I know that term has been really overused in the internet marketing and content creation space, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. So has some good value, has actually a good point, some good qualification, simple CTA to something that's actually relevant. And I love the headings and the things like that. That's actually kind of what inspired me to make this video. Is I was like, oh, I do this. Cool. I'm finally seeing someone else do it too. I would have, there's a couple places where maybe I would have tweaked some of the language. And in general, I just wouldn't oversimplify what I'm writing if it starts to detract. And then this image I would have put in the email and yeah. Anyway, I hope this video was useful and interesting. And hopefully you got something out of it. We were definitely here for a long time, but hopefully, it was worth it. If you would like to chat with me further, feel free to hop onto my email list. It should be linked below, vigilantecopywriter.com. And if you're interested in any of my coaching programs, I definitely have some mindset stuff, client acquisition stuff, copy tutor, which is how I help you improve your writing. That's my most popular thing. And it's kind of a thing I've kind of become known for in certain circles. So if any of that interests you, feel free to hop on my list or shoot me an email or whatever. And if you're just interested in hearing about me further, hop on my email list and I send out some really fun stuff. Anyway, till next time, thanks for watching. See y'all soon.